everybody. Welcome to Rad One Radio. I am your host, Rob Anthony Dyer, and with me today, my guest is the star and creator of the hit web series Devanity. I am pleased to have Michael Caruso with me. How's it going, Michael?
Good, man. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. I love your show, as you know. I am a huge fan of Dallas, as we've talked about before, as I know you are,
right.
And you know, your show is a great tribute to those types of shows, but with a new twist.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have to say, I love Sherry or Cherie, J. Wilson.
Cherie. It's hilarious. When we premiered her episode, everybody was like, Sherry was so great. I was like, guys, her name is Cherie.
You know, when I was a kid, I thought it was Cherie, and everybody told me, no, it's Sherry.
No, it's Cherie. It's Cherie J. Wilson.
That was like the best acting I've ever seen from her, and same thing with
She's
Charlene.
so talented.
Yeah.
And then I'm not tooting my own horn when I say this, but I really do feel that you can have the greatest actors on earth on your set, and if you don't give them something to work with, it doesn't matter how talented they are, because a script is a script. Sometimes, unfortunately, actors aren't given the benefit of the doubt, and they're not given the ability to really showcase what they're capable of. And it's kind of nice as a fan of these actors, because I come at it from the perspective of, I love what you do, and I believe in what you're capable of, so let's give you some great stuff and see where you take it. And Cherie was a prime example of that. She was so into that scene that she would, kind of trip up on herself a little bit, only because she was so in that moment. And she was legitimately so angry at Jason that, we did it a couple times, because she just absolutely just went right for Jason's jugular. And I absolutely love watching that scene. She just blew me away. And it's so funny, because she's probably one of the nicest people we've ever worked with on Devanity. She is sweet and lovely, and she was telling us stories about Dallas and her career in Walker, Texas Ranger, and I couldn't be a bigger fan of Cherie's. I think she's a doll.
I've always loved her in Dallas. In fact, I remember when I was a little kid in the episode where her character died, I literally cried. And I was very upset because they kept her in the credits for the entire season, so I'm thinking she's really not dead and going to come back. And
I know that she has, rethought her request to be written off Dallas. I don't think that anybody at the time ever thought that a lot of these shows like 90210 or Melrose Place or Dallas would come back as, not a reboot, but a continuation series or anything like that.
Because she could have been back. She could have still been married to Bobby and everything. I liked her a lot. In fact, I think that was the only reason I was able to accept Pam's departure, was when Bobby and April got together. But she got some bad writing on Dallas. They really gave her some lines that I don't think anybody could have delivered very well.
I think that the April character on Dallas, what happened to her in a lot of ways is what happened to Pam, is that the longer she was on the show, they neutralized her so much that she started losing her layers, and she just became this squeaky clean goody two-shoes. And when April first appeared on Dallas, she was kind of a bitch. By the time she left, she was like Mother Teresa. So they really, I think the original Dallas sometimes struggled with three-dimensional portrayals of women the longer they were on the show. I think that they stripped a lot of that away over time. So it's unfortunate, because Cherie is just a tremendous actress, and I really applaud what she's capable of doing.
I was wondering if maybe you'd purposely pissed her off before that scene or something.
No, we were laughing in between takes when we released. Once the season is done, the series, I should say, is done. At the end of every season, we release our blooper reel, and there's some great bloopers with her. But we were laughing in between takes, and she was just. We try very hard not to piss off the guest stars whenever they're on set. Unfortunately, we never have. So she's just a bubbly, lighthearted, lovely human being.
You probably are one person I've ever talked to that knows more about Dallas than I do, and I know that was you told me that was one of your biggest influences. So, in the shows I've watched every season, you kind of pay tribute while poking a little fun at those shows. I love that. You've had great guest stars from Dallas: Charlene Tilton, Steve Canale, another one who I thought you brought out the best in his acting.
Steve is another one that's just phenomenal. It's an interesting story about Steve. I wrote that character for him. He was the first person that I wanted to play Charles Kane, and I reached out to his agents, and obviously we don't pay a network rate, which is, thousands and thousands of dollars. So they just kind of passed it along to him. And he actually called Charlene Tilton, and Charlene, I have to give her credit, Charlene is the reason why Steve ended up on the show, because she told him what a fabulous time she had when she worked with us, and she really sang our praises and really encouraged him to do it. And Steve called me, and it was crazy. I was at work, and I saw that I had a voicemail, and it's from Steve Canale, and I'm like, how surreal is this? You got like this Dallas legend leaving you a voicemail. I'd obviously never spoken to him directly before, and I called him the next day, and I think that the biggest trick was trying to kind of explain to him what a web series was, how we do it. This is a form of entertainment that is just so light years away from what a TV star from the 80s is probably used to, that it wasn't an issue of whether or not he liked the script, because he loved the script. Mm. It was an issue of trying to explain to him that, no, we're not getting rich off of your performance, and we're underpaying you, and this isn't going to disappear or anything like that. And he really came around. He said, I'm going to have lunch with my wife, and I'll call you in an hour with my decision. And sure enough, an hour later, he called me and said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the show. He was fabulous, and he tells this really great story about the longest scene he ever had on Dallas was with Barbara Bel Geddes. And he said that the scene that I wrote for him was even longer than that. So I actually gave him more dialogue on Devanity than he ever had in 10 years on Dallas.
Wow.
So that was kind of a fun thing. And the best part of all of these people is they come onto your set, and then just the stories just start to flow, and it's mesmerizing. You're just listening to these people talk about television history that was just an everyday part of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting there with drool coming out of my mouth because I'm just fascinated by it all. And obviously, you get to hear things that you typically don't say in interviews and whatnot, and that's always fun. And
unless it's Gordon, he says everything.
Gordon is probably the most candid of probably any of the guest stars that we've ever had. Because that's what I love about him, and I think that's what makes him such a spectacular actor. Is there's an honesty to him. There's no bullshit with Gordon. What you see is what you get. He likes what he likes. He doesn't like what he doesn't like, and he's not afraid to tell you what he thinks. And I think that is very refreshing in LA when you meet somebody as talented as that isn't worried about burning bridges or hurting somebody's feelings. He's a very sweet man. Gordon would never intentionally hurt somebody's feelings, but he calls it like he sees it, man. He doesn't screw around.
No, that's what I loved about him. He wasn't afraid to tell stories that, it might piss off some producer that he worked with 20 years ago or something. He was very honest, but like you said, he's very polite. And that was surreal to me when I got an email from Gordon Thompson. I'm like, oh my God, And then I talked to him on the show, and he's going to come back again.
Got to get him back. Some of the first time he was ever on set, and he was talking about working with one of my favorite actors, Charlton Heston, who was just a great big ham back in the day and whatnot, but he was Hollywood royalty, and I can't even begin to describe how surreal it is when you grow up watching somebody on your television screen, and then years later you're performing in a scene with them on a show that you wrote. Wow. It's very humbling, and it's very exciting, and I'll never be able to really describe that feeling, because obviously you have to be a fan, first of all, to really appreciate the full magnitude of it. But for me, it's just like, I have been able to work with all of my heroes, and it's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. It's one of the many gifts that Devanity has brought me over the years.
To a certain extent, I've gotten a chance to speak with many of the people that I grew up watching on television, and I have actually become friends with some of them. So to a certain extent, and actually there is a person that we plan on doing a creative project together. I'm really looking forward to that.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah,
awesome.
Hopefully I'll be able to know what you're talking about fully. But yeah, man, I love Charlene's line about the tampon. That was classic. I mean, when she was on Dallas, they gave her nothing. Steve and Charlene were used as human props, except Charlene got, I think, one meaningful scene, and it was an insult to them, I think, and an insult to the
you're
fans.
talking about the new Dallas.
Yeah, don't you think? I mean,
yeah. It's very tricky because it's not my show,
right?
So it's really not my place to judge. But if I take the Michael Caruso creator hat off and come at it from the fan perspective, I'm very disappointed. Only because I look at it this way. Either bring people back and use them,
right,
or don't use them at all.
Exactly.
Because what you're doing is you're negating a lot of history. Ray owns part of South Fork.
Yeah.
He was Jock's son. He is Bobby's brother. He, you know, to me, you've got a character like Ray, just to be specific. You know, he and Jenna left with Bobby.
Lucas.
But I just think it's kind of ridiculous that Bobby's not like, hey, how's my other son doing? I mean, knowing Bobby's character, it's not the kind of thing that he would choose to ignore. I mean, it's hard because I you know, and I said this to you before, I appreciate that they want to take it in a direction, but no Dallas that I ever watched when Larry Hagman passed away, the maid is at the funeral. Bullshit. That would never happen in a million years with anybody. It's this whole Mexican cartel thing and this whole side thing and imaginary characters that never existed. There's so much rich material that's right there for them to use. There are so many children and illegitimate children, and there's just, it's not like they're hard up for stuff to use because it's all sitting right there on the desk. Like they're just choosing to ignore the history of Dallas, and that's the part where I do feel comfortable saying I think it's disrespectful. I understand wanting to make your own mark and creating your own show, but you cannot deny 13 years worth of history. Right. I don't think that's an appropriate thing to do. I wouldn't want somebody to do that to my show. It's like if Devanity were a network show and we, you know, ran like that and we came back and all of a sudden, you know, Jason never acknowledged that he was married to Lara, I think that would be weird. You can't just sweep history under the rug. Right. You have to embrace it.
Well, especially because they have characters, if they want to focus on a younger generation, there are pre-existing younger generation characters they're not using, like you said.
That's correct.
Lucy's not a kid anymore. They could actually write for her as an adult. I personally still
Lucy
think...
could also have children.
Exactly.
They could have had other children.
Right.
You've got Lucas, you've got Margaret, you've got James Beaumont, you've got all of these people. Right. You know, but she, you know, Cynthia just wants to do something very, very, it's hilarious to me. I get so many emails or messages on Facebook, you know, private messages or whatever, and they're like, "Could you call the Dallas people and you know, talk to them or whatever?" I always laugh, but I'm like, guys, they don't care about me. If they cared about me, they would have tried to hire me, but they don't care because they don't want somebody like me on that set, because I would be going through being like, all right, first step, let's make South Fork look like South Fork again. Yeah. Let's get rid of all the Calvin Klein models and bring normal-looking people back on this show like it used to be. Step 3, let's freaking, I don't know, say use original characters that actually have history.
Especially with Larry.
Get Flip Barnes out of Mexico and fucking make this shit happen.
I know Victoria Principal did say in an interview that they told her they killed her character off, and then when they backpedaled, that wasn't something she knew about, and she didn't want to go there.
It's the fact that they teased the audience and made the audience believe that there was a chance that she was going to return. As a show creator, I will tell you this. You don't jerk the audience around like that. It's not, you know, one thing that I learned in 4 seasons of Devanity is that people get incredibly bonded to characters. People fall in love with these people. And it's, you know, we killed off Lara's character this year. You know, if you're going to tease the potential return of somebody, you've got to deliver on that promise. You've got to do right by your audience each and every time, period.
I agree. So Vanity's, this is the last season, right? Which is very saddening to me.
Saddening to me, too.
What made you decide that?
It was a lot of things. I think that, you know, we've been working on this for 4 years solid, which is pretty intense for a web series. I would say that the average web series typically runs about 1 or 2 seasons, and we've been going for 4. And each year that we come back to Devanity, we try to build on what we've done, and we try to do more and, you know, have, you know, bigger, better. Keep in mind, you know, our season 4 episodes are typically running between 21 and 25 minutes apiece. Yeah. And if you compare that to seasons 1 and 2, where episodes were 8 to 12 minutes, you're talking about massively, you know, increasing the runtime. And if you were to chop up all of season 4 into what seasons 1 and 2 were, you'd have a 13-episode season, basically. And that's an expensive venture. You know, the more you film, the more expensive it is. And money isn't really the reason why we're ending it. I just think that my production team, the fatigue finally set in, not in the sense of they weren't firing on all cylinders and delivering a beautiful product. I think that Rod and Kelly really outdid themselves this year, and I think that's very evident in the work. But they're tired, and I'm tired. And you know, we had a lot of people, in 4 years, a lot of life circumstances have changed. You know, Kyle Lauder moved to New York. Alexis moved to Seattle. Mike Dirksen moved to New York. There's just, you know, over time, people's lives just take them in different directions. And what I didn't want to do is have the show suffer from a quality perspective. I've always been a big fan of British television, and I've always admired that. You know, the Brits are very good at pulling the plug on a series before it overstays its welcome. And
they focus on quality over quantity.
Creatively speaking, I felt this year with Devanity, I was really proud of the writing. I was proud that we took the show in a more serious direction to an extent, and we'd really done a lot of really spectacular stuff. And it's very painful for me to say goodbye to Devanity because it's like an old friend, and I love it more than life itself. But I think that a little break is good. And you'll see when you do see the series finale, it is left open just a squinch to where if we ever wanted to bring it back, we could. And that's part of the beauty of the internet. It's on a network. We're not canceled. There's nobody to tell me what I can or cannot do. So if I wake up in 6 months and say, you know what? I've got a great story idea. I want to do this. I want to do that. We can totally do that. And that's always an option on the table. But for right now, I think it has been the greatest test of discipline in my life to say, okay, let's call it a day on this and end it on a really, really, really high note. And I'm very proud of the work that my cast and crew has done. 4 years. I mean, 4 years working 9 months out of the year on Devanity. I mean, for me, it's 12 months out of the year, but you know, I think it's a good thing. It's a sad thing, but a good thing. I'd rather have people say to me, "We wish you weren't ending," than what happened at the end of Dallas.
Definitely. I mean, that's something to be proud of, and I agree with what you said about British shows, where they generally do 6 episodes a year and focus on quality rather than quantity.
You know, the nice thing that gives me a great deal of comfort with the world of Devanity is it is like a Dallas or a Dynasty or a Falcon Crest in the sense that it's about a family. And when you've got family at the core, characters can come and go, and you can bring things back and start it fresh. And, you know, the Devanity family could have a whole crop of the next generation. That's something that I've always toyed around with, is taking a little break and then having the next generation of the Devanity family pop up. Not like what they're doing on Dallas, but
5 years later, the kids are 20, kind of thing.
You know, I always, if Jason survives the series finale, and I won't say whether he will or will not, I could see Jason doing what his father did and adopting kids. And if you adopt, it doesn't really matter. I would say that Richard Devanity was roughly my age when he adopted Jason and Bianca and Jackie and Byron, so I don't see why Jason couldn't do the same thing. So I mean, that's all kind of been built into the plot to where you can cheat things without me having to have fake gray hair.
Right.
Because I'm not ready for that yet. No gray hair yet.
Me neither. I'll dye my hair till it looks stupid. But you know, I noticed this season it seems like Jason was sort of always, or at least appeared to be, the most moral of the Devanity clan, who sort of held the family together, and now his morals are becoming compromised, or at least just maybe stuff he'd been hiding is coming out. So
I think that in the earlier seasons, I think the only difference was that there were, it's almost like Cherie, I think Cherie's monologue sums it up perfectly, that Jason has always been able to hide in the shadows because the behavior of the other people around him was worse than his. And I do believe that at his core, Jason is the most moral of the Devanities, or at least he has the strongest sensibility of being able to know the difference between right and wrong. I think that Jason is very lucid, and he's choosing to be good or he's choosing to be bad. And I think that Lara's death profoundly rocks him to the core, and that's one of the things that I loved about our first 2 episodes, is that for the first time, we really see Jason having true remorse for his behavior. Jason's always kind of skidded on the rails because he's always yelling at somebody else. But for the first time ever in season 4, we see Jason really take a look at the fact that he is no cupcake. He is absolutely just as guilty as everybody else in this family, and he's holding himself accountable for it. And I think that to me was very powerful, because I think that when we as human beings acknowledge our own faults and or behavior, I think that's a great moment of realization. And I think that's what makes for great drama. I think that, it's always fascinating to see somebody say, oh my God, they have that moment where they realize that they're a shithead.
Well, yeah, it's amazing in a web series, especially where until this season you did such short episodes, you were able to really flesh out the characters and create 3-dimensional characters that were very complex, and it wasn't all black and white.
And that's the beauty of the 4 seasons, and not the group. The beauty over time is that every year I've really tried hard to layer the characters and add dimension and make them into human beings. And right before I started writing season 4, my father was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, sorry.
And it really rocked me to the core. It absolutely just shook me on a very profound level. And I found it's funny when you write things. I don't know how other writers do it or whatnot, but for me, my writing is always a reflection of what's happening in my life. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I was writing season 4, I was for the first time looking at the concept of loss. And my father is alive, and he's doing great now, and he's in remission, thank God, and whatnot.
That's awesome.
But at that time, it had never occurred to me, what would life without my father be like? It had never crossed my mind before. We get so used to having people in our lives that we never for a minute stop and say, well, what happens if I lose this person?
Yeah.
And it really affected the writing, because I really brought that into Jason, and I really channeled a lot of that fear and anger and pain. And you'll see that Jason acknowledges his loss of his best friend Alex and his wife Lara and the potential loss of his sister Bianca. And you see Jason processing all of these people that he's been surrounded by, and he's really feeling that he's frightened. He's very frightened, and he doesn't want to lose any more people that he loves. And that's one of my favorite lines in all 4 seasons of Devanity, in episode 3, when he looks at Bianca and he says, I can't lose any more people that I love. Yeah. And he honestly, really, from the bottom of his heart, means that. And he's terrified. And I just love it. I think it's so...
Well, yeah, and I also was wondering if... I noticed that perhaps Jason was reluctantly and very subtly, like almost deep down, wanting to maybe accept Preston Regis in a certain way, but still resisting it.
I think that it's like anything else. I think that a lot of Jason's... I grew up with 2 very loving, wonderful parents, but what's always been interesting stepping into Jason's shoes is, what would it be like to grow up, not just, Jason's scenario is different because he grew up in the orphanage knowing that he had been abandoned, very clearly abandoned, and it was not a pleasant experience for him.
Right.
And I think that Jason really is driven by a lot of his abandonment issues, and which is why he fights so hard. Anybody else would, I think, run screaming from a family is dysfunctional for the Devanities, but I think he fights for his family because it's what he has. And I think that, once again, as the seasons have progressed, it's all about adding layers. And I think that while he loves Richard, and Richard is, in his mind, his father, I think that he pities Preston. Mm-hmm. And I think that he really sees that Preston is just a very sad character in the landscape of the Devanity world, and he doesn't want to hate Preston, but he doesn't want to forgive Preston.
Right.
And
there was that scene in the last
series
episode.
finale, you will get a much better explanation of that whole thing. There's a really great scene between the two characters, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's a really wonderful, wonderful moment between the two men that will explain a lot of things to the audience.
You summed it up perfectly, where it's like he doesn't want to forgive him, but yet he does feel like some bit of compassion towards him, and it showed just a hint. You did a really good job of that. And anybody who has not watched, go to devanity.com and watch in HD. It's really, really amazing. And I have to ask you now, is this done, do you shoot digitally?
Yes, we shoot with both a Canon 5D and a 7D, depending on what the scene is, and, Rod, our brilliant cinematographer, switches out lenses and all that stuff like that. I'm not a technical guy.
Right.
I'm good at making things pretty. I'm good at writing. I'm a decent enough actor, but I don't do any of the techno stuff. So, yes, it is all shot digitally, and that was one of the reasons behind not wanting it on YouTube and wanting it on Vimeo, is I think Vimeo is a fabulous platform for people that actually give a shit about how their show looks. And I'm very strict about that. I always want HD whenever possible. I think it's very, 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 very important.
It was finally I was able to figure out I can stream this to my HD TV and watch it in big screen. It was really different.
It's weird, isn't it? It's weird when you watch it on television. Every time we get the prototypes for our DVDs every season and we watch it on TV, I always look at my wife and I'm like, oh my God, we're watching it on television. It almost feels like we have a real career.
Now, what is next for you, or do you know? Do you have any plans or aspirations?
I do know. I'm going to be doing another project, which and I hate saying this because it's so crappy. I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
It pisses me off when people say that, but I'm going to say it for the first time ever. I can't talk about that. And then when that is done, I'm working on a new soap opera that I'm very, very excited about.
Another web soap?
Yes, another web soap. It's either going to be another web soap, or I'm finally leaning towards maybe the potential of turning it into an indie film. I don't really know the answer to that right now, so we'll just say it's a web soap for right now, because I love the soap genre. But this is going to be... It's going to be a soap opera with just a touch of fantasy.
Sounds very interesting.
And it's going to... One of my favorite things that we did this year in Devanity, in episode 3, we went up to the mountains. We went up to Big Bear to film up there, and I fell in love with Big Bear. I absolutely loved being in the woods and shooting there. And I've got a pretty great idea for a pretty fabulous show, and I want this one to be a little more multicultural. As of right now, the lead of the show would be an African-American actress, and I've always wanted to do something like that, and it's going to be very fun. It probably won't veer too far away from Devanity, because I like shows about rich people. I don't think that soaps should ever be about poor people. That sounded really bitchy to say, but I said it.
Well, unless there's a poor family in the mix, but yeah, you got to have the rich family there for sure.
Sure, it's going to be a multi-family saga. And I'm very excited about it. But it's funny, in every interview that I've been doing since we released Devanity, everyone's like, what's next? And I've made a firm commitment to end Devanity and put it to bed and just focus on that. And then I'm really going to... I've done a lot of thinking, and I've got some fabulous ideas, but I really want to just say goodbye to... I'm sending my first kid off to college, and I need to say goodbye and make my peace with that, and probably, honest, to be really candid, grieve a little bit, because it's very emotional for me. And I will say this about Devanity, if over the next, year, the award cycle goes well and things go well, and once I've had a little bit more distance, I'm not opposed to doing a little reunion movie.
I was just going to ask you that. Would it like an indie film or something, to...
Not a film, but I would probably do like a 2 or how Dynasty did a 2-part reunion or whatnot. I would absolutely be willing to do a 2 or 3 part little, I call it a mini series, I guess, to bring some of the characters back, not all of them, because we don't know who's going to make it. But I'm definitely open to doing that. That's something that I would be very interested in doing potentially.
Well, I think that's good.
I don't know. You never know until you reach that point. You know, a year from now, I could be like, okay, I'm good. It's done. It's all out of my system. And then I could maybe wake up one morning and be like, you know what? I've got this great idea. I want to bring everybody back together. And we could very easily do that. So it's too early to tell. I don't know. So I'm going to move forward as if this is the end of Devanity. And then if something happens, I'm open to those possibilities. No, I'm not like Victoria Principal. I am open to the idea of coming back.
Thank God. No.
There have been a couple people that I've really wanted to get for Devanity, and you just can't get a hold of them because they don't do it anymore. Yeah. They don't act. I would love to have worked with Susan Howard. I absolutely would have loved it. But she lives in Texas, and she's doing her thing. I also wanted to get Anna Alicia from Falcon Crest. I would have loved to have worked with her. But, you know, a lot of these people just you know, especially the Dynasty cast. The Dynasty cast really has kind of just gone off and done their own thing. And it's interesting. It's interesting how things change. And
yeah. I did interview Emma Sams, and she did a couple of weeks back at General Hospital, you know, for 50th anniversary, and she's in talks to be able to maybe do a story arc for a month or two, and because she lives in England, she doesn't want to go full time, and I passed Gordon's info along to her, so I'm hoping they get back in touch with each other. I always like to be able to do that. It's nice to be able to reconnect people.
It's nice to see that people still care about each other after all those years later. They still want to see what's up, and I think that's a really lovely, lovely thing.
Absolutely. Well, you know, it's been great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to the new series because...
Thank you. I had a wonderful time today. This was a great interview. You asked some really wonderful questions, so thank you so much for having me, and thank you for wishing me luck on the new show.
Yes.
I think you're really going to like it. I think it's going to be pretty fucked up.
Well, you know, I love Devanity, and if it has to end, I'm sure anything new that you do, I'm going to love just as much. And I've heard the I can't talk about it thing from more than a few guests, and if things work out, it's usually a good thing, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you.
Good stuff, my friend. All right, well, be good. Thank you so much for having me. I had a lovely time.
All right, thanks, Michael. And everyone go to Devanity.com and check out, you can watch the whole series. All right, have a great night.
The whole series, every Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Bye, man.
Once again, that was Michael Caruso from Devanity. It's definitely one of the best web series out there. If you haven't watched yet and you are a soap fan, which I assume you are if you're listening to the show, definitely go to Devanity.com, watch it in HD. It's really amazing. Start from season 1, episode 1, and you will really love it. It was great having him on the show. I really look forward to his future projects. You can also look forward to Gordon Thompson coming back to chat with me in the near future, who plays Preston Regis on Devanity as a recurring guest star. And Gordon, of course, was the legendary Adam Carrington on Dynasty. I also have Tracy Bregman from The Young and the Restless coming up very soon, as well as a few other people who I just have not narrowed the dates down, but I can tell you that for soap fans, you're definitely going to be happy. Stay tuned, and I will post the guest schedule on my website shortly before I do the interviews and give you a chance to submit your questions. The best 4 or 5 questions will be chosen, and you will get credit on the air with your name and or Twitter handle if you like, and get your question answered. So thanks for listening, and
this is Round One Radio.